Hello stampers! I got a couple questions on the watercoloring video that I did the other day, so I'm going to show the different mediums that I use to watercolor with, and hopefully you get an idea of how they work. So the first thing I did was I'm just using some plain old regular watercolor paper. This is just Strathmore, your cheapy watercolor paper. It's 140 pound. I stamped out the outline flower again from the Altenew Beautiful Day set, and I stamped it in VersaFine ink. I like VersaFine ink because it is very black and it is waterproof once you let it dry. So I quickly stamped it out and heat set it. And I also have my nonstick craft mat underneath here. Okay, so that'll help. And then I have some various spray tools, some water, some brushes, some water brushes, and a palette, and some other things around so that we can see how it comes out. Little paper towel there. I did want to tell you guys, Hobby Lobby had a sale today. I don't know how long it's for, but paper and stamps, I believe, were 40 to 50% off. I picked up two beautiful stamps. This one I thought would look great for a watercoloring stamp or even a color pencil stamp. So this is made by Inkadinkado. Regularly $11.99. I picked it up for $3. And this one is going to be really great for watercoloring. This is Hero Arts. Regularly $10.99 to $75. So very large. And I will probably unmount these. I showed the video on that last week, and make them cling mount stamps. Alright, I digress. So, I stamped all these out. I kind of labeled the items that I use to do watercoloring. I'm going to zoom in here for you guys so it's a little easier for you to see. Alright, so we're going to start in the top corner here with Distress Stain. I guess we could start with Distress Inks, Distress Oxide. So I think what I want to do is I want to do a dry on wet technique on half the flower, and then a wet on wet technique on the other half of the flower. So let's see if that works. So I have some Distress Stain here, Wilted Violet, and all you do with this is you just put it down on your craft mat. That's it, nothing special. So if I do, open up my water container here. Alright, if I do just direct to paper, I'm just wetting I'm wetting my brush so that I can pick up some of the ink here, and just going to put that down onto the paper. So it's very much a transparent ink. Soaks right into the watercolor paper very nicely. So there we go there. Alright, so now I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to wet this side of the flower. I normally like the wet on wet technique better because of the way the water kind of spreads on its own. I think it gives it a little more organic look to it, a little more watercolor look to it. Now here, it's not soaking in right away because that water is sitting on top of the paper yet. But still very easy to work with, very nice. Very vibrant in color. So that is Distress. That's the stain. I marked it wrong. That's okay, we can fix that. And then I will just take my paper towel, wipe that up when I'm done. And if you wanted to, you could go through with the heat tool. I probably will do that at some point in this video. once we get further in. Okay, next one is going to be Distress Oxide. Same thing, we're going to put a little down on our craft mat here. Now again, the Distress Oxide ink is my new favorite pigment ink. It is a hybrid of pigment and dye. Same thing, we're going to take the brush and go right into the ink and go down into the paper here. Now because this is a hybrid ink, it has the pigment qualities. You can see as soon as it hits the paper, it starts to dry. It's sitting on top of the paper, so it would be more vibrant, but you can tell that it's just very dry. It does not want to soak right into the paper. So we're going to wet this down a little bit. I have my Distress sprayer here. I'm just going to put some water on there to wet that down. That makes a big difference. Now it's going down pretty much like the Distress stain. It's a little more wet. It is drying pretty quickly. It has that opaque look to it because of the pigment in it. Still very nice though. And I'm going to wet the other side of the flower here. You could put a little too much water down there. Not as vibrant. Obviously the water is kind of soaking the ink down into the paint. I mean the ink down into the paper. It's not as vibrant. Definitely mutes it out when you do the wet on wet with the Distress Oxide. So this is Distress Stain and this is Distress Oxide. You can definitely see the difference there in the opacity with that. And again, we're just going to spray it and wipe that up. All right, now we're going to look at regular Distress ink, not the oxide. This is Wild Honey. Same thing, put it down on our mat. Pick that ink up. And it's almost identical to the Distress Stain. Maybe not as bright as the Distress stain, like it's a little more transparent. Or should I say translucent? My daughter loves that word, translucent. Alright, and let's do the wet side here. Same thing, as this is sitting on my craft mat, I can see that it's starting to dry out. So I'm just going to spray it. Having a little extra moisture there will help to pick up that color and move it along. But it is drying back a little. Once you add that water to it, it is definitely lightening the color. So that is just regular Distress ink. So you can see straight to paper, it's definitely much darker. Then adding the water, it lightens it up a little bit. But all good mediums to use if you wanted to use them for watercoloring. All right, let's move on to two typical watercolors. I have the Peerless watercolors, which I have swatched mine out. I put them on little 3x5 index cards and swatched them out. So let's just grab this one here. And Peerless are nice because they're really inexpensive price point, and you get these pigmented cards and the color is already on there, and all you do is just pick it up. So taking that direct to paper. Very vibrant watercolors. Very little to clean up with these Peerless, because you just go right to the card, pick up the color, and start painting with it. and then you just put it away. You let it dry and put it away. You don't have any, don't have very much cleanup with these. This is very vibrant. Maybe it's just the color I have. I don't know, but it is very vibrant. And you can see even with the wet technique, it's not really dulling the color down like the Distress did. I'm trying to get that to wick a little more. Let me put a little more water on here and see if we can get it to wick. I just don't have enough water down to get it to wick, but very, very vibrant. Okay, so that's the Peerless. All right, another traditional paint medium would be the Gansai Tambi Japanese paint sets. These are made by Kuretake. The palette there, and let's go in with this kind of orange color here, and just wet my brush and go straight to it. I did a video comparing the Peerless and the Gansai Tambi. The Gansai Tambi to me are a creamier paint, very similar to the Distress Oxide, where they kind of have a cream base to them, so you can really make these a thicker paint. So if you don't like real watery paint, you want more control over your paint, that's what these remind me of. You can water it down more if you want more of that watercolor look. So let me just wet this side over here. I'm going to try to put a lot of water down so we can see how it moves the pigment. Yeah, and because it's so thick, it really doesn't want to travel. But again, the colors are very vibrant, highly pigmented. So you can see very bright, and then when you add the water, they still stay bright. They're not really drying back very much. All right, the next couple of things would be using gelatos. Gelatos are usually used for mixed media. They're kind of like a crayon. So I have a set here. And same thing that we did with the Distress, I'm going to just put it down on my mat here. Using this like bubblegum pink color. And it's a very dry medium. It's like a crayon. So what we need to do is just activate it with a little bit of water. And we can put that straight to paper. And already I can tell that it dries back a little. Now you can color direct to your paper with gelatos like a crayon if you wanted to. Let me try to pick up some more of that medium there. It does get a little brighter the more you pick up, but you can see it's very translucent. It does dry back and lighten it even with, you know, picking up that concentration of color there. I guess it just depends on what kind of look you're going for. If you want a really bright pigmented look, I would say go with either the Gansai tambi or the Peerless watercolors. If you want a muted down look where it's not as bright, where you can add some layers and layer up how dark you want it, then I would go with the Distress Inks, Oxides, or the Gelatos. And again, it just depends on what you have on hand. You never have to go out and buy everything. I understand people are on a budget, and you might have some of these items in your craft room. And this is just to show you different ways that you can utilize it. So there you can see what we've done so far. Alright, so the next couple I'm going to kind of quickly go through because I just did a video on these. These are the markers. So the first one would be the Zig markers. I will tell you, I do not like using markers on watercolor paper. I do not think that they blend very well. They are much better on Bristol smooth cardstock, in my opinion. Obviously, just to go direct to paper, it's going to give you your brightest, and then you're just basically coloring it like a marker. And we'll go over here and wet this down a little. So there's a couple ways you can do it. You can wet it down, put your ink in there, and like I said, these blend a lot better on Bristol smooth cardstock. And you'll see it starts to wick and travel a little bit. You could put a little more water on top to pull it outwards. On Bristol Smooth, it works a lot better than watercolor paper, in my opinion. The watercolor paper just kind of soaks this color up, and it stays put. So in my opinion, if you're going to use any of these markers, the Zig, the Spectrum Aqua, or the Spectrum Shimmer, then go with the Bristol Smooth cardstock. So there's that. All right, these are the Spectrum Aqua watercolor brushes. They have a fine tip and a brush tip. Same thing, we can go direct to paper if we want the maximum intensity of color and use it as a regular marker. Or we can wet this side down. Go in with the marker and color it and then pull the color out. And I did a video comparing these markers previously. I'll post the links at the end of the video. Okay, so there's the Zig Spectrum. I will tell you the Spectrum Aqua, I don't use them very often. I don't like the way that they don't blend very easily, so I really don't use them very often. So you can see the Zig. The Zig is beautiful on Bristol smooth paper. Spectrum Aqua. And then the last one down here I'll do real quick is the Spectrum Shimmer markers. So these are highly pigmented, and then they have a nice shimmer involved in them. I know that the camera doesn't pick it up very well, but it is very glittery, very nice. Add a little sparkle to your projects. And this is a bright orange color. This is called Juicy Mandarin. And this is actually one of the Sheena ones, which is the same company. Same thing, put some of that down. The way I like to do these is to put the color down and then pull it out. Again, same as the Zig markers. They do excellent on Bristol Smooth. But you can see they reactivate with the water nicely, and there's plenty of shimmer there. It does dry back a little bit, but that's what gives it that really cool watercolor look. So it's not as vibrant, but the secret to these pens is the shimmer in them. So there we go for our markers. All right, the last one I got a couple of questions on are non-traditional, I would say, watercoloring mediums. Well, that's not true. I guess people do use them for watercoloring. What you would not consider paint, I guess I could say. All right, so the first one I'm going to do is actually down here in the bottom. This is your Nuvo paste. And remember, folks, keep your lids. Keep your lids. And we're just going to take a little bit of this paste with a palette knife. Put it down on our craft mat. And we do have to moisten this. And I've seen people put this in misters and use it as a shimmer spray. But you're just going to moisten that down and get the pasty chunks mashed down into a nice shimmery paint. So again, direct to paper. Lots of sheen, almost like a pearlescent sheen. It's not shimmery like the spectrum markers are. It's more pearlescent. And again, the wet on wet over here will do. I don't really like to use my Nuvo paste this way. I like to run them through stencils, but I know a lot of people like to use their Nuvo paste this way. Again, also a mixed media item, just like the gelatos. And I'm surprised at how much it's holding its color. It's really not drying back. Okay. All right, and then the last two are going to be my two new things I've been experimenting with, and I'm going to use my palette for these two. The Brusho and the Primary Elements. So the Brusho, I just poked a hole at the top, and I'm going to just sprinkle it in here, and think of like a salt and pepper shaker. You're going to see tiny little flakes of pigment come out. A little bit goes a long way. And then in order to activate it, you will need to spray some water in there, so you can see right away it starts to activate. And again, just going to take my brush and mix it up. So the more water you add to it, it's going to dry back a little bit. Going direct to paper. Very bright. Kind of reminds me of the Peerless pigments. And then on this side, we'll do our wet side. Now there's a lot of techniques you can do with these Brushos because they're in that powdered pigment form. A lot of people like to just go direct to paper with the pigment and then spray it. That's pretty cool. These are beautiful and very easy to use, I think, in terms of watercoloring. I mean, it really likes to travel. It does dry back a little bit. It's a little lighter, but you can always go back in if you want that to darken up. So you can see the dry side and then the wet side. Okay, now primary elements. Primary elements, there are these little shaker bottles. You can order these off of Amazon. These have iridescent sparkle in them. I don't know if it tells me the size of the bottle. I don't know what size this bottle is. Same thing though, you're going to sprinkle that down into your palette. A little bit goes a long way. This is an ultra fine powder. It's not as thick as the Brushos. Here, I'll show you side by side. Someone asked if these kind of fly around. I guess they would, depending on the environment that you're in. All right, so here are the Brushos. The Brushos to me looks like ground up chalk. That's what it looks like. So it does have like a powdery consistency to it, but you can see it's very chalky. All right. So it does get airborne, which is what makes it pretty neat. The Primary Elements pigments, to me, look like eyeshadow, ground up eyeshadow. So it's really fine. I don't know if you guys can, the camera will pick that up. It's really, really fine, and it just reminds me of eyeshadow. It's just super, super fine. So yes, I think that they both do go airborne if you're concerned with that. You want to make sure that your workspace is covered well. Neither one of them has a scent that I can tell of, nothing that would be bothersome. Same thing though, we have that pigment in the palette here. We're just going to spray it down, and you can see almost immediately it has that shimmer to it. And we're going to do that on the dry side here. And it goes down, and it right away has that pearlescent sheen to it, just like the Nuvo paste did. This is much more shimmery. As the Nuvo paste is drying, it's losing some of its sheen. The Primary Elements is not. That sheen is still there. Same thing, lightens up a little bit with the water, the wet on wet technique. But it does travel nicely, just like the Brushos do. The biggest difference between the two is that the Brushos don't have that sheen, the Primary Elements does. Alright guys, this video is longer than I had anticipated. I do apologize for that. But here you can see, close-up view, the Nuvo paste, Primary Elements, Brushos, Zig markers, Spectrum Aqua markers, Spectrum Shimmer markers, Gelatos, Gansai tambi paints, Peerless paints, Distress stains, Distress oxides, and Distress inks. My favorites in terms of how you would use them in terms of watercolor would definitely be the Peerless ones. They do go down very easily. If you're going to use Bristol paper, I love the Zig markers on Bristol paper. That there. And if you're just going to be doing regular watercoloring, I would definitely say try the Brushos or the Primary Elements out. Spectrum shimmer markers are also very easy to watercolor with. There's a lot of pigment in those markers, and they're not messy because they come in a marker form. And all you need is just a bowl full of water, or if you have some of these water brushes, they make it a lot easier to do as well. So that's my comparison on direct to paper and wet on wet watercoloring using different mediums. Thanks for watching, guys. If you have any questions, post them below. I will link where you can find some of these items. I got most of them at local stamp shows. And if you haven't already, click that subscribe button so you can be notified when I post new videos. Thanks for watching, and keep on stamping.